In this chapter, we'll learn to restrict access to a portion of our application so that only users who log in with a valid username and password can gain access. We call this process user authentication. Now, user authentication is not exactly a beginner topic, but there are a couple of reasons why I think it's worthwhile to include in this essential training. First, password-protected areas have become so common that you're almost guaranteed to need one in any site you build. And if you need it, then it's going to be important that you add it correctly. Mistakes in this area can be very costly. It also helps reiterate the point that I've made a couple of times that site development choices and site security go hand in hand, and you're going to need to be mindful of security in every part of your code. And finally, it's going to give us a chance to take a look at a few more features of Rails. Here are some of the concepts that we'll see. And before we dive into actually implementing the different parts of authentication, let's begin by getting a 1,000-foot overview of how the login process works. So to begin with, an admin is going to create a user in the database. So they're going to create their username, they're going to create their password. And the password will be encrypted before it's stored in the database. At that point, the user has the credentials they need to log in. The database now knows who they are, and it's ready for them. When the user shows up to log in, they go to the login form, they enter their username and password and hit submit, and the application then tries to authenticate based on that username and password. It searches for the username in the database, and if it finds it, then it encrypts the password they gave us and compares it against the encrypted stored password. We'll talk about why that's true in the next movie. If those two encrypted passwords match, then it's going to set a variable in the session to the user ID and then redirect the user to whatever post-login page we want them to see. Maybe it's a page that says, "Welcome, glad to have you," or it's a menu page. At that point, the user will start surfing around inside the restricted area. They'll request additional password-protected pages, and with every request, their browser will send the cookie and session data along with the page request. The application will then check that session data to see if that user ID that we set is still there, and if it is, it'll go ahead and give them the page. If not, it'll send them back to the login form and ask them to re-authenticate and go through that process again. And then finally, when the user is done surfing around the pages, they can click Log Out, which will then wipe away the user ID that we stored in the session so that then in the future, they'll have to go to the login form. I think it's helpful if I give you an analogy. Imagine that you're buying tickets to a concert. So purchasing the tickets for the concert online or over the telephone, that's like the admin creating a user in the database. At that point, you are authorized. You have the ability to go. You just have to show up and pick up your tickets. So you show up and you wait in line to pick up your tickets. And then when you show up at the front of the line, you present your identification. You show them your ID, the credit card you bought it with, and the ticket booth is then able to determine that you are authorized to attend this event and you get your tickets. They also give you a hand stamp at that point, and from then on, you're authorized to go in and out of the event. You can come in and out as much as you need, and you have a hand stamp on your hand that will make sure that you're always allowed to enter. So you can just show your hand stamp, avoid the line, and re-enter. Now, if at any point you don't have the hand stamp, it doesn't mean you can't get back in. You just have to go back through the line and re-authenticate yourself again. And then logging out would be equivalent to just washing away that hand stamp completely. So this is the overall process. We're going to break it down into its component parts and implement it piece by piece. And we're going to start by talking about encryption so that we can create users with their credentials in the database.